Hi, hello, happy Pride Month still. I am back with even more gay recommendations, LGBT recommendations, queer recommendations, whatever you will. If this is the first video you see, you should know that before this I have done a recommendations video with some contemporary, queer, off the beaten track recommendations, and now I am going to do the queer classics that I have read. I'm sure there's more, but these are just the ones I've read and enjoyed. Mostly. We'll get to that. So last video I left off with Jeanette Winterson, who I love, but obviously her most well-known work would be Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. Innovative in style, its humor by turns punchy and tender, Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit is a few days' ride into the bizarre outposts of the religious excess and human obsession. It's a love story too. That's funny because I don't remember it that way. It's been a while since I've read this. Oh, only 3 years. Wow, it feels like a lot longer. Sadly, I did not annotate back then, so I can't read you anything amazing, though I'm sure it's full of amazing quotes. What I remember from this mostly is that it's about a character named Jeanette Winterson, no relation, who is raised by very strictly religious parents, especially her mother. They do not get along very well. Growing up as an eccentric little kid and also a lesbian. I have found a pattern in lesbian classic books where mother and daughter relationships crumble rapidly. Or they're never good to begin with. Mother and daughter relationships in lesbian classics. I could write a whole thesis on them. Maybe I will. So this would be the first one on that list, but I have a lot more right here. This cannot go mentioned without also mentioning that this was very much Jeanette Winterson's own experience growing up, but she did fictionalize it because she couldn't really cope with the reality of how it went down, which she then, a couple decades later, wrote down in this book instead. Why be happy when you could be normal? A lovely quote of her mother's. This is kind of like a companion piece. I mean, obviously this is not really a classic, but if you're gonna read this one and you're interested, you should definitely also read this one, because this is like the real accounts behind what happened in this one. And yes, it's more unsettling and upsetting and rough, but it's very good. I mean, if you see my last video, you should kind of know how Jeanette Winterson writes, and she never disappoints. Not me, at least. Sadly, I didn't annotate this one either. You're just gonna have to take my word for it. Ooh, next one is also one on the terrible mother and daughter relationship list. Rubyfruit Jungle. I have recently reread this, so I do remember some more of this. Molly Bolt is a young lady with a big character. Beautiful, funny, and bright, Molly figures out at a young age that she will have to be tough to stay true to herself in mid-20th century America. In her dealings with girlfriends and boyfriends, in rocky relationships with her mother, and her determination to pursue her career, she will fight for the right to happiness. Charming, proud, and inspiring, Molly is the girl who refuses to be put in a box. I feel like this is written by someone who had a very... You know what? It's not a sad book. That's not what I'm saying. She is eccentric. I don't know if she's like a girl boss. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this. But yeah, it's written in a very fast pace. I'm gonna look for a quote because I did annotate this one. Oh, this is funny because it ties into the title of this one. Why be happy when you could be normal? Because there's this part where Molly gets called into the dean's office when she's in college, and the dean asks her if she has a problem with her roommate. No, wait, she says she has a problem with girls and her roommate, and then Molly says, I don't have any problem relating to girls, and I'm in love with my roommate. She makes me happy. I know it's not normal for people in this world to be happy, but I'm happy. I like that one. Are all homosexuals as perceptive as you? I don't know. I haven't talked to all homosexuals. I love her. Oh, Molly, why do you have to have morals? Because I don't have money. That's brilliant. I love her. Let's stop this shit. I love women. I'll never marry a man, and I'll never marry a woman either. That's not my way. I'm a devil-may-care lesbian. You know what? She is an icon. Rubyfruit Jungle. Just read it. It's not hard to get through. I think people are sometimes intimidated by classics, but there are some that are written just very easily. We are also getting to classics that are intimidating. This, however, is not one of them. It is the oldest one on the stack. I decided to put it in there because, you know what? Jo March is a lesbian. We can all agree on this, right? I have to because I had this one first. I read this one. I was like, I need to read it before we go see the movie. Read it, loved it, but I was like, strange because, I mean, I read Evelyn Hugo, so I know Beth is supposed to die, but she didn't. But then I watched the movie and Beth did die. And I said to my friend, that's rude because she didn't actually die in the book. And my friend was like, what the fuck are you talking about? She does die in the book. And I was like, what? No, she doesn't. It turns out this is only half of the book. I know there's 2 parts, but like, why do they publish it with the same title and not tell me that it's only half the book? Maybe there's a second book with the other sisters on it. I don't know. So anyway, for my next birthday, my best friend gave me the full version, the grown-up version, I guess. She does die. They didn't lie in the film. It was actually true. Anyway, I put this on the LGBT classics because it's undeniable, okay? We all know that Louisa May Alcott herself was probably a lesbian, as were also probably most of the other women who were writing in the 1800s, because otherwise they would not have been writing. I could talk about Emily Dickinson, I guess, but I'm not a big poetry person. I've read some poems by her and like them, but I'm talking about books here, so I'm sorry to Emily Dickinson. I love you, but this is not your time to shine. Ooh, next one. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. This matches my decor so well. I love that. Anyway, no one had told me before I read this that Maya Angelou was gay. Was anyone gonna tell me that? Again, I did not annotate this, so I can't remember for the life of me what happened in this book. I do know that it's obviously not queer focused, but I do very vividly remember her being in love with a girl. That's why I think it deserves its spot on this list. Even though if you're going to read this, you should probably not do it for that reason, but for great writing and also race. However, if you are looking for great writing, thoughts on race, and queerness, this is the one. This is the one that we do not talk about enough. This is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is tied together because this book is literally falling apart. Can we also talk about the film Whoopi Goldberg's debut, in which she fully kissed a woman in 1985? That's pretty groundbreaking. And it was Steven Spielberg too. Crazy times. Great movie. Dear God, I am 14 years old. I have always been a good girl. Maybe you can give me a sign, letting me know what is happening to me. So begins Alice Walker's touching, complex, and engrossing novel set in the harsh, segregated world of the Deep South between the wars. Celia has been raped by the man she calls father. Her 2 children are taken away from her. She has been forced into an ugly marriage. She has no one to talk to but God. And then she meets Shook Avery, the singer, the magic woman, and discovers not the pain of rivalry, but the love and support of women. Probably lots of trigger warnings for this one, but it's worth it. I really loved the vibe of this, especially nearing the end. It all felt so warm. Also because it was in the South, so it was warm, but also like the family aspect of it. And I really like the parts where her sister goes to Africa with a group of white missionaries and she learns the differences between Black Africans and Black Americans. And I thought that was a very nice, fresh perspective. Really good. We don't talk about it enough. Let's all talk about it more. Next one, I do have some men. I read about men sometimes. This is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. This edition is tiny. This one I did annotate, and let me tell you, I loved this book. It takes place in like the 50s-ish in Paris, and it's about a love affair between a man and a young man named Giovanni, who is a bit of a misogynist. Actually, he's very much of a misogynist, but if you look through that, if you just turn a blind eye to the sexism, it's really good. Confusion is a luxury which only the very, very young can possibly afford. And you are not that young anymore. Well, that was a drag. Somebody, your father or mine, should have told us that not many people have ever died of love. But multitudes have perished and are perishing every hour in the oddest places for the lack of it. He could not risk the question because he couldn't have endured an answer in the negative. An answer in the negative would have revealed what strangers we had become. That's so sad. Why will you go home and then you will find that home is not home anymore? Then you will really be in trouble. As long as you stay here, you can always think, I one day will go home. You don't have a home until you leave it, and then when you have left it, you can never go back. Oh my god, I underlined so much of this. Perhaps he is a fool and a coward, but most everybody is one or the other, and most people are both. I love that. Also, what I want to say about this book is, like, I have read other, like, man fiction from the era that this was written in. I'm specifically talking about Jack Kerouac and, like, man books that are all like,
oh, we are sad, we are going on road trips and being in cities and being sad.
I'm also talking about Hemingway. And men are all like,
oh my god, that's the best thing ever written.
Other books written in this era have never hit so hard for me. Man books, they just don't do it for me. The prose slacks, but in this one, this prose did not slack. This was amazing. Also, that one reminded me of another one that we obviously need to talk about, because you're not going to talk about LGBT classics. LGBT classic? Well, yeah, mostly. you can't talk about queer classics without talking about Oscar Wilde. I am very proud of this edition. It's very, very old. It's from 1902, I believe. Look at that. Oh, that is so sexy. I have actually annotated this one, but I didn't fold down the pages because I was afraid. Nothing can cure the soul but the senses, just as nothing can cure the senses but the soul. I feel like most people who read classics have probably read this one. It's very much on the beaten track. It's been beaten to death, literally. But still, before I read this, I had no idea. When I was reading this, I was just like, what? Murder? I had no idea. That was a big plot twist for me. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I feel like everybody does know that. So yeah, The Picture of Dorian Gray. I couldn't not mention it. I had to. Moving on. Oh yeah, here she is. The most intimidating one on the stack. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf herself. Wait, there's a more intimidating one, actually. Okay, so this is Mrs. Dalloway. One question. Was anyone ever going to tell me that the actual Mrs. Dalloway was canonically a lesbian? I mean, not explicitly, but she was. It was undeniable. Was anyone going to tell me that? Did I have to find out for myself? Again, I did not annotate this, so I couldn't tell you exactly how we found out that she was a lesbian. I found this one incredibly hard to read. Here's the thing about me. I love the concept of Virginia Woolf. I think she is one of the most interesting writers in, like, queer history? British lit history? I don't know. I'm just very interested in her life, let's say it like that. But her writing, I wish I loved it more than I actually do. It's good, but it's very hard to get through. She makes very long sentences, and she goes off on tangents, and most of the time, she is so right for that. Also, she is very funny. We don't give her enough credit for that. She is so sarcastic, like, you don't expect to encounter that, but she is actually funny. But yeah, her writing, it gets a bit dull sometimes, and I wish it didn't. I'm trying to get more into her writing, but I definitely don't think that this is the book for that. Actually, the first book that I read by her was Flush, a biography about a dog, which I loved because I love dogs, so that works out. I think that's a good one to start with. This is not. But yeah, it is a very good book. It's just, you have to get into it. The next one, Trans Icon, Orlando, also by Virginia Woolf. This edition is so gorgeous. I wish I had more of these, but I only have the years in this edition. I have so many of Virginia Woolf's books, and I genuinely wonder if I'm ever going to read them. Not at this pace. But anyway, I have read this one because it's iconic. This was written in 1927 or 8. I always forget because the next one is also written in 1927 or 8. I don't know which. Anyway, the point is, it was written almost 100 years ago, and it's wild. Because not only is Orlando a trans icon, but also, why is she immortal? Do we know this? I don't think we know this. She just turns into a woman one day, and then she's immortal. Honestly, good for her. She seems to be having a blast, so it's probably fine. The thing I love most about this, obviously, is that Orlando was based on Vida, which means that Vida was so masculine coded that Virginia just went in her head, wouldn't it be cool if she was a boy once, back when she lived 400 years ago? The mental gymnastics that she did to get there, I love it. I guess it shows how much she loved Vida. I have a book about Vida that I'm quite excited to read because I'm just so interested in these two. There she is. The man, the myth, the legend. Vida Sackville-West. I really like to think about how many people would have been trans if they had lived these days, or if they had the words back in the day. This is one of those books that really solidifies that for me. Let's talk about the other one. Because this one is known as the first lesbian novel of all time. And you know what? It's just not. This is not a lesbian book. This is The Well of Loneliness by Radclyffe Hall, and this is very much about a trans man. I could not name you a book that is more about a trans man than this one. I read this at exactly the right time in my life, when I was coming to terms with my own gender. And I remember before I read this, I read a book about a trans boy. I'm not going to name it because I hated it, but it was YA and it just didn't do it for me. And then I read this one and I felt so seen. This was it. Like, the plot is also okay. This is about, I mean, technically she's a girl. We call her she throughout the whole book. So her name is Stephen, okay? Her father knew. Stephen is an ideal child of aristocratic parents, a fencer, a horse rider, and a keen scholar. There is a lot of privilege in this book. I have a recommendation for you if you despise that kind of lifestyle. We'll get to that. Stephen grows to be a war hero, a best-selling writer, and a loyal, protective lover. But Stephen is a woman, and her lovers are women. As her ambitions drive her, and society confines her, Stephen is forced into desperate actions. The Well of Loneliness was banned for obscenity when it was published in 1928. Thank you. It became an international bestseller. For decades, it was the single most famous lesbian novel. It has influenced how love between women is understood for the 20th century and beyond. That's trans erasure. I don't think lesbian Hall. I don't think Radclyffe Hall was very concerned with lesbianism. At least Stephen was not. She had not yet learned that the loneliest place in this world is the no man's land of sex. Let me read you my favorite quote because it drives me insane. Yeah! Alright. This is something that Puddle, who is her homeschool teacher slash nanny, but then eventually came with her when she was an adult. She's the person who knows her best. She tells her, or no, she wants to tell her. I'm gonna cry. You're neither unnatural, nor abominable, nor mad. You're as much part of what people call nature as anyone else, only you're unexplained as yet. You've not got your niche in creation, but someday that day will come. And meanwhile, don't shrink from yourself, but just face yourself calmly and bravely. Have courage, do the best you can with your burden, but above all, be honourable. Cling to your honour for the sake of those who share the same burden. For their sakes, show the world that people like you and they can be quite as selfless and fine as the rest of mankind. Let your life go to prove this. It would be a really great life work, Stephen. That really gets me every time. Another part that really gets me is when I'm looking for the one where she's talking to her mother. Ooh. And this is why nobody is ever allowed to say again that this is a lesbian book, okay? As my father loved you, I loved. As a man loves a woman, that is how I loved. Protectively, like my father. I wanted to give all I had in me to give. It made me feel terribly strong and gentle. It was good, good, good. If I loved her the way a man loves a woman, it's because I can't feel that I am a woman. All my life I've never felt like a woman, and you know it. You say you've always disliked me, that you've always felt a strange physical repulsion. I don't know what I am. No one's ever told me that I'm different, and yet I know that I'm different. And that's why, I suppose, you've always felt as you have done. And for that I forgive you. But what I will never forgive is your daring to try and make me ashamed of my love. I am not ashamed of it. There is no shame in me. Hold on, I just need to... Where's my annotation pencil? If I loved her the way a man loves a woman, it's because I can't feel that I am a woman. So clearly this one also goes on the list of lesbian or trans masks who have terrible relationships with their mother. I've heard a lot of people saying that this book is whiny and self-pitying. And you know what? That is true. But if you say that, you do need to recognize that you have the privilege of not ever having experienced the no man's land of sex. Once you have, this will be very dear to your heart. The actual better version of this book, the non-extremely privileged one, is... I don't have this book. Actually, you cannot have this book. You can't own it physically, unless you bought it when it was published back in the 90s. Let's talk about Stonebridge Blues. I would say that Stonebridge Blues is my favorite book. Period. Yeah, I'm gonna say period, because I think genuinely that it is the most important book that anyone could ever read. This is me telling you to read Stonebridge Blues. You have to. And you know why? Because you can download this book for free on the author's website, lesliefeinberg.net. I will put a link in the description if that was it, and also if that was not it. This was earth-shattering to me, and it's a very important book. It talks a lot about class, police brutality, queer people. It also talks a lot about butch and femme culture, which I think that people generally misunderstand. Basically, this book is about a queer person in America who was born in the 1950s, and we follow them up until the 90s-ish. And we just follow the progression of gay life in that era in America. It's a very important book. It's written very fast-paced. The prose isn't stunning or gorgeous, but it's very easy to read. It's very easy to get through, aside from some very graphic scenes that might be a bit triggering for some. Like I said, there's a lot of police brutality and assault and things that are not great, but they are very important to discuss, and this book does it so well. It's very accessibly written. I mean, I've read other things by Leslie Feinberg that were a bit more academic, which I hate, and it is my mission in life, it is my mission on BookTube to get absolutely everyone to read Stonebridge Blues, because we should. I have one little quote that I want to share. Like I said, it doesn't have the most beautiful prose, so I can't quote you much, but this one line. In the spirit of the wild loneliness and the loneliness of the no man's land of sex, strange to be exiled from your own sex to borders that will never be home. That is the non-binary galaxy brain. Yeah, no, I just need everyone to read it. If you're not going to read any of these books, fine by me, but please just consider downloading Stonebridge Blues from the link below. I promise it will be worth it. You will learn something from it. You will maybe even relate to it. It's worth it. You need to do it. Do it. This is me forcing you to read Stonebridge Blues. Do it. That was all for my classic recommendations. There are probably more queer classics, but these are just the ones I've read. Let me know what your favorite queer books are. I would love to know. I always welcome recommendations, but mostly if they're gay, so... Okay, yeah, that's just not happening. If anybody ever dares tell you that being queer is a modern trend, that more people are gay now than they used to be, that's not true. There was always a lot of gay people, they just weren't allowed to say it. But some of them did, anyway. Anyways, have a nice day, read some gay books, and I will see you next time.